Hey everyone, I am Jeremy Caspian Walsh here with Soulbound Studios. I'm being joined by Vi and Death on my left and right, and we're here to talk about another Q&A on the topic of survival. Before we jump into the questions and answers, I wanted to give you guys kind of a high-level overview of survival in Chronicles of Elyria. The reason that we're really adding survival mechanics to Chronicles of Elyria is for the opportunity for dramatic storytelling. Storytelling is all about the encounters and conflict that occurs along the journey. It's not about the destination. You know, you're traveling from one settlement to another, and there's highway robbers that are lying in wait halfway along the trip. If this were a normal game, then no matter how long I've traveled for, I'm fully rested, I'm always ready for combat, there's no strategy involved in that. But in Chronicles of Elyria, with elements like fatigue and vitality, then the longer you travel without stopping to take a rest, the lower energy you have, the lower vitality you have, and the more likely that you are that if you're to be ambushed, that you would be at a severe disadvantage. And so by introducing concepts like needing to rest, needing to eat, needing to drink, and things like that, what it really allows us to do is to create opportunities for really interesting, dramatic storytelling. All right. With that out of the way, hopefully we've kind of just laid a good foundation for the rest of the conversation. Let's get into the questions. If you're walking back from the astral plane and you get back to where your body would be, as long as you can get back there safely, then it wouldn't likely result in any kind of permadeath. The two exceptions that we've mentioned before are places where your body would not be recoverable. One is at the bottom of the ocean. So if you are on a ship, the ship sinks or whatever, or you fatigue and you can't swim any further and you were to sink to the bottom of the ocean, there is a strong likelihood that that would result in permadeath. The other one, of course, is the opposite, which is if you're chilling out on the edge of a volcano and you were to fall into some kind of molten pit, you're also not going to walk back from that. Those are the only two extreme environments I think we've said that will likely result in permadeath.
When you get back to your body in those sort of situations, there's going to be like a little buffer that comes back, so it's almost like you had passed out. So you'll wake up with a little bit of fatigue, a little bit of vitality. You should be able to get moving again. Worst case scenario, probably about 30 minutes to move to your next location. So you want to try and find shelter, find food, or whatever it is.
We don't want it to continuously be punishing, but I mean, if you're out in the middle of the desert and you run out of food, that is a problem.
Yeah, don't just wait in the desert for it to happen again.
Each time you become incapacitated, or each time you are forced to spirit walk, and you wake back up again, you're going to want to try like hell to make it out of there.
So yeah, you'll have definitely multiple sources you can get it from, like chopping open a cactus and getting water from it. Another example is like berries and things like that.
In terms of structures, there's obviously kind of natural structures. So if you're out in an area where there's a lot of trees, you can, climb a tree or something like that. If you're in an area that has a lot of caverns or caves, then you can use those as a natural structure. But beyond that, there's actually, as part of the survival tree, the ability to either take shelter from objects nearby or to build kind of makeshift structures. So the idea is being able to build a small campsite or shelter using natural resources in the area, and that would be biome specific. So developing the ability to do this in one biome would only marginally affect your ability to do it in other biomes. Obviously your OPCs know how to fight and stuff like that, but I'm going to provide some general guidelines here. This is definitely a game with two different play experiences. There's inside the settlement and outside the settlement. And while we're not instancing or anything like that, we are distinctly making inside the settlement, outside the settlement function as two completely different mechanics. In general, you're going to want to log off inside of a settlement as best you can. When you log off outside a settlement, all bets are off. All the survival mechanics take into effect. You're going to get killed at some point. So definitely aim to log off inside of a settlement. So I think having a temporary shelter is going to give you some protection from the elements, exposure, temperature, and things like that. But your character is not necessarily going to just hunt while you're offline. OPCs require you to do combat in order to hunt in many cases. Fishing is a little bit different, but in general, you can't use skills that would still offer skill progression. So it's as long as you've got a kind of a reserve of food inside of your shelter and stuff like that, you should be okay. But keep in mind that even having food inside of your shelter, it's going to attract other creatures that are also looking for a source of food. We really recommend that people play the game like this. You're inside of a settlement, you're doing your thing, you decide you want to go out and adventure, so you head off for a while, you explore something that you've never been to before. Maybe you set up a checkpoint there with some other people, or built kind of like a trading post or something that allows you to kind of have that as an intermediate shelter that you can then use to go further. But eventually you're going to need to make your way back, and preferably that happens within the same play session if possible. It's not to say that you can't leave your OPC in charge while you're not in the settlement, but it's definitely much safer to log out in a settlement. So there are 3 factors that play into that. The first of which are attributes. As your character gets older, your attributes become harder and harder to maintain along the physical dimension. So like strength and agility and stamina, they atrophy much quicker. So if you're doing things like hacking away at trees, building shelters and things like that, it will become more challenging as you get older. On the other hand, presumably as you get older, your skills have also improved. So that is offset by the fact that you are probably better at building temporary shelters and identifying berries and tracking and trap building and all the survival mechanics. So being older doesn't necessarily mean that you're at a disadvantage. It just means that depending upon how you spent your youth, you could potentially be at a disadvantage. And then the last mechanic is metabolism, which plays into hunger, thirst, temperature, and all those, and how they relate to vitality. And the idea is that depending upon what your metabolism is, you are either going to need food more often or less often. Poison will metabolize faster or slower. You'll get cold faster or slower depending upon your metabolism, and all those things change as you get older. Being in the desert will cause your thirst to go up faster, which will cause your vitality to drop quicker for most people. However, certain tribes are better suited to those climates, and so if you are a tribe that lives in the arid desert or semi-arid desert, then you have a natural predisposition towards that harsher environment, and your vitality will not drop as quickly as other members.
An apprentice is someone who like goes out in the wild and knows enough to like he can work at and he can make a fire and find the food he needs, but he actually has to work at it. But he could survive. Once you get a little bit better, you're going to be the type of person who can just survive out in the wild. You could be out there, you don't really have to try as hard. It's essentially like second nature at that point. And the master is the person who's treating like the wilderness as his own settlement. So he's the person who's out there. He doesn't need to go into cities. He doesn't need to get resources from there. He could purely live off the environment itself.
Generally speaking, we don't want the survival mechanics to become a burden on the player. Like, we want them to create opportunities for really dramatic stories and interesting encounters, but we don't want them to be things that players have to micromanage. You probably want to eat every 2.5, 4 hours, something like that, but you can go a day real time without food, and it's not going to have too much of an impact. After that, you're going to start to see your vitality dropping pretty rapidly, and you're going to suffer all the effects of hunger. So in general, plan to get some food in your character's system, get the temporary food buffs and stuff like that before you go off adventuring, and then depending upon how long you're planning to adventure or how far you're planning to go, expect to have to eat once or twice maybe while you're out adventuring, and not really any more than that. Yes, one of the things we were talking about is cooldown on usage due to environmental exposure. So if you fall into a river, if it starts to rain on you significantly, if it snows significantly, things like that, that will impact the items that you have on you. What this does is it not only means that you have to make a decision about whether or not you want to ford the river or not, but it also means that there is an opportunity for crafters to make, for example, water-resistant or weather-resistant items. So think, like leather bags and things like that, specifically for keeping the contents from getting wet.
Dry pouch.
Dry pouches, yeah. So yeah, that's definitely something that we're planning to do.
It's not going to be like permanent, but if you fall off a cliff and you break your leg, there's going to be some recovery time involved in it. If you get it set and going, then you'll recover much faster than if you were just to leave it and sort of wander off. Semi-permanent, but not permanent.
As far as the healing goes,
yeah.
Are there things that they can do out in the field versus only in town? Will the healing be better, faster? How will the place and the quality of your healing affect your injury there?
Yeah, if you have access to like medicines, things like that, or even if your survival skill's high enough and you can find like the right herbs and stuff, you could sort of expedite the healing process. If you're in town, probably going to recover a lot better. You'll have vitality a lot higher, things that you'll need around you. So
it's things like fishing and tracking and hunting, or not hunting, but trapping to make sure that you have access to food, building shelters and fires and things like that for making sure that you have exposure. We could potentially even do stuff with like makeshift clothing, so it's not like a full tailor, but allowing you to take like furs and stuff like that and turn them into like makeshift clothing for exposure purposes. You know, we're not opposed to taking things that would be traditionally used inside of a crafting profession like tailoring or leatherworking and create kind of like a minimal version of that and putting it in the survival tree, so that people who have that skill when they're out in the wild without knowing how to be a tailor can at least take the furs and stuff that they've skinned and do something productive with
Strap
that.
it to your body in
Yeah,
some
just
way.
like some way, like at least knowing how to tie those things together. Yeah. You don't actually have to drop the backpack to fight better. If it's on your back, you can fight just as well with it on.
But if you're encumbered.
But if you're encumbered, if it is heavy, if you've got a heavy load, then yes, you can drop it. But the thing you need to be aware of is that at the point where you put it in your hands or drop it on the ground, the looting rules change, because now it's no longer your possession necessarily. It's something that you've laid on the ground, and somebody could technically come up and take it much easier than they would otherwise. It's still your possession, so it would still be taboo or flag them as a criminal for taking your item for some period of time. But whereas you normally couldn't loot a person, loot their backpack unless you coup de grace them. In this case, somebody could actually loot your backpack. There are wounds and injuries that will need to be stitched up. There are bones that need to be set. There is a need for taking medicine for fighting off diseases and other things, modifying your vitality. One of the things we want to do in Chronicles of Elyria is to make sure that our skills feel a lot more immersive. So first aid's not going to be like right click and then the person heals. There's not going to be like the bandaging animation and like you get the little pluses that are floating off of the person. Like, our goal is that you can actually see a wound and do something with that wound. There are no survival skills which are intentionally only usable in certain regions. However, the applicability of some skills will be less valuable in some regions than others. In terms of your ability to stay there long term, they're temporary in the sense that they are going to fall down faster. I mean, exposed to winds or rains or other things like that. Like, think of them as consumables. Like, they're not going to last forever like a building would. How long they're going to last is something we'll have to experiment with through playtesting, I think. We don't really know exactly what the values of those are going to be yet. And then in terms of their ability to hold off predators and stuff like that, I mean, it's going to hold off a predator as much as a tent normally would, which is to say, if a predator finds that you have food in there and it wants to come inside, it just will. So
yeah, I think the more staying power of that is along the lines of how you set up the area around the tent, not necessarily the tent. A tent is just a piece of cloth and some sticks, right? But if you were to, like, I don't know, you've learned trapping and stuff and put the appropriate traps to keep animals from getting close. Torches, find the right location too. So like maybe you're pinned up against a mountain so something can't come around the backside.
So diseases are actually unique amongst the ailments that exist in Chronicles of Elyria. We talked about like getting injured, needing to set a leg or a broken bone or something like that, poisons, venoms, and other things like that. Those all naturally will heal over time. Diseases are different in that they do not go away on their own. So if you were to contract a disease in the game, then you have to find the cure for it. Otherwise, the effects of the disease are permanent. That's one of the few things that are permanent. Now, a disease in general will not kill you. It's not perma-death, but they generally will have some kind of negative effect that are persistent until you find the cure for that. Ultimately, it's a what you see, what you get system. So if somebody has got something on their person, it'll be visible in some place, or it needs to be carried in a container. We start with kind of the default backpack, where the idea is that you can put a backpack on. That will give you some volume of space where you can hold items. And that means that if you continue to put small items into the backpack, eventually the volume or the weight, maximum weight of that will be consumed, and then you can't put any more items in it. But it also means that if you have an item like a longsword or something like that, that it wouldn't actually fit in the container at all, because it has dimensions or volume that are too large for the backpack. So containers have not only overall total volume, but also kind of some shape to them as well. So certain things will fit in some things, certain things will not. Strength determines how much you can carry in an absolute value. If you're not strong enough, you simply won't be able to carry the stuff. For example, if you're wanting to pick up a log and haul it or something like that, if you're not strong enough, you won't be able to lift it. But also how strong you are will determine how much your stamina loss is as you carry things. So the weaker you are, the faster your energy or vitality will drop as a result of carrying it. Well, coins are stackable in the sense that in your inventory you could drag multiple coins into a pile. However, they are not weightless. and even stacking them together doesn't change the overall weight. It just makes it easier for an organizational standpoint. So coins are something you have to carry in a money purse or in your backpack, or coin purse or in a backpack, and they do take up space as well as have weight. In a nomadic lifestyle, typically you're going to be having wagons and stuff with you, and there are specific types of wagons that you can craft that act like portable settlements. So in that regards, you can sleep in them, you can have crafting stations in them. They provide you the passive and active bonuses that you would normally get from the buildings inside of a settlement. They're effectively, for all practical purposes, portable buildings, and as long as the entire community stays together and doesn't kind of branch off, then you have access to all of those buildings at once. So that allows for a settlement to kind of get up and move around and to follow the resources wherever they might be, which is extremely important in the arid desert in particular, because while there will be oases and kind of stationary settlements that have a good supply of water and food, they're going to be few and far between, and they actually might not have enough resources to hold everybody that lives inside of that region. And so people will naturally have to travel in between the different water holes and things like that just to make sure that they can survive in that biome. So one of the things we talked about is actually having crafting items like food bags that will help preserve the food on your person. And it also creates a nice mechanic where if you put something inside of a food bag, inside of a backpack or something like that, your character will automatically consume that. It doesn't provide any kind of active buffs or anything like that, but it does mean that if, let's say, you were to log off in the wild and you had food inside that food bag, that you would periodically go ahead and eat it automatically. So you don't have to be there actively cramming food into your face. So that's a really nice mechanic. Pets actually work much the same way. We will probably allow you to go ahead and stockpile some food on your pets, with the idea that as long as you're within proximity of them, the assumption is that your character is kind of automatically feeding them periodically and tossing it to them.
Feedback.
Yeah, same idea. So so basically there will be either an inventory slot on your character or on your pet themselves where you can kind of just store the food, and then more or less they'll eat automatically over time. I can give one example right off the top of my head, which is the identification of different plants that you need to gather in order to create medicines and things like that. We're more than happy to let you create an antivenom out of a nearby plant and consume it only to find out that it was lethal to you. So part of it is going to be identifying in the world around you what is consumable and what isn't consumable and what the benefits of these are. Another example might be tracking. So the skill itself will give you the access to spot different types of tracks easier, but it's still up to you, the player, to recognize what those tracks are, as well as like the first aid. We talked about that previously, about the user experience of having to set a bone and things like that. That's an example where the character skill will give you access to using different types of tools and knowledge from a character standpoint, but ultimately you as the player are the ones that need to set the bone and stuff like that. We talked about the conifer rats previously and their ability to act as sentries. We've talked about things that can hunt and stalk, things that can track, things that can provide better line of sight, things that can...
I mean, even if you had just a dog, they might be able to alert you that there's a predator out there because they can smell them further away than you can.
Right. I mean, so pretty much all the ways that you would expect. The sight, heightening your different senses or allowing your pets to provide senses that you as a player don't have because your character is in the world, like smell and sight and sound and things like that are definitely going to be there. Movement speed, we talked about mounts being able to get around in the world faster. I think all of those are going to play a role. If you're a nobility hanging around inside of your castle, or if you're a commoner who's just a producer, like let's say you are the blacksmith of a town, then as long as you're staying inside the settlement, you virtually never have to worry about survival mechanics for the sake of survival. Now, that's not to say you don't need to pay attention to them. And what I mean by that is that, you know, when you're outside of the world, your hunger and thirst are gradually going up, and you're getting more and more hungry, and your vitality is dropping, and you're getting more and more tired. When you're inside of a settlement, they tend to stay flat. So as long as you're in town and not doing anything, you're neither getting, rested, nor hungry, nor thirsty. That being said, if you're actively doing things like crafting and production, those things actually will cause your vitality to go down as you do them. And so people who are in town are still going to need to stop periodically and rest and in order to recover those things. So your character wakes up, you're just hopping online, you want to spend the day crafting. It's a good idea to still grab some food, get that food buff, it's also a good idea to make sure that you take breaks periodically so that you recover those things, so that you, again, either get the rested bonuses and food buffs, or just that your character has the vitality they need to do the things that they want to do throughout the day. One of the things we really wanted to do is to make it so that the gathering place in Chronicles of Elyria is not like the bank or the auction house or something like that, but is more akin to what we see in our world in terms of like medieval and historical fantasy, which is the bar. We want people to be hanging out at the pub, at the tavern, right? What we've done is we've taken the survival mechanics and we've reinforced that inside of places like the inns and the taverns. So if you're wandering around the settlement, your vitality, your hunger, your thirst, those are typically not going to change much, or might drop a little bit, but aren't going to ever reach zero. If you make your way over to one of the common rooms or something like a tavern, then your vitality and your energy, like your vitality, your hunger and thirst, those will actually start to go up automatically just by being inside of that facility. If you then proactively eat or drink while you're there, it's actually going to go up quite a bit faster, as well as potentially provide you the rested bonus. And then if you are inside of a tavern or common house where there actually is a performer, or if you are doing things like playing dice or cards or other things like that, then it's going to cause it to go up even faster. So you've been out and adventuring for the last couple of hours, and you're not ready to call the playing session quit. You wanted to head out again and do the same type of thing. Best thing you can do in order to recover quickly is to stop in, take a quick rest at the inn, 3 or 4 minutes to sleep, head downstairs to the common room, play some games, listen to some music, do some gossiping, get some food and some drink in you, and then you should be good to go to head out again within about 10 minutes. Cool. Couple simple things. For those of you that are active in the community, please note we've been making a ton of forum updates, so make sure to check out the forums and engage with your fellow community members. We put out a newsletter this week, so if you haven't checked your email recently, go ahead and check out the newsletter for March. And I think that's all I got.
Yeah, cool.
All right.
Cool.
Awesome.
Well, thank you guys again for joining us for today's Q&A on the topic of survival, and we will see you guys again in April.
Bye.
Bye.